Hello again. This is a short little video, probably um, much shorter than the others that I've been doing, about um, the mechanics of quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing. In other words, using sources. I had you read something for, it's scheduled for April 8th, which means tomorrow, April 15th, Wednesday, because everything's pushed forward ahead a week. Um, had you read something about the mechanics of quotation, paraphrasing, and summarizing. Um, and I wanted to advise you a little bit about that. Um, in a research paper, you're going to be using, of course, information from sources, right? And so you have three different ways that you can use material from sources. You can quote from it, using exact words in quotation marks, of course. You can paraphrase it, paraphrase meaning putting it into your own equal language, or you can summarize it. Right? If you're paraphrasing and it's a sentence that's this long, your paraphrase is probably going to be about that long. Summarizing, you're taking maybe a book and condensing it down to a paragraph or a sentence or something like that. You could take a chapter from a book, you could take a paragraph and summarize it in a sentence. Taking a longer piece of text and condensing it into a shorter space, and you do that by eliminating all the details and leaving behind or bringing along all the major points, depending on how long you want the summary to be. If it's just going to be a single sentence, you'd find what the author's thesis or main point was. If it's going to be a paragraph, you maybe have the thesis and then discuss some of the major supporting points. So those are the three different ways you can use material: quoting, paraphrasing, or summarizing. And we've done some of this before. With our short papers we've been writing, we've been using quotes in all of those. And for advice about quoting, you might look back at the guidelines for essays on literature that I gave you earlier in the semester. It's a two-sided document. And on the second side, it discusses, under the heading of evidence, it talks about how to use primarily quotes, because that's what you've been using in your literature papers. The same will hold true for summaries and paraphrases. The same kinds of advice will hold true for those two. And next week, I'll talk about how to cite your sources when you're quoting, paraphrasing, or summarizing. So we'll talk about citations next week. This week, in this video, I want to talk a little bit about not the mechanical process of taking quotes and paraphrases and summaries into your paper, but in general, how to kind of take on the ideas that you come across in your research. The chapter I had you read in The Little Seagull talked about synthesizing ideas. The first little section is only a couple of pages long. Talks about synthesizing your ideas, and it's a difficult concept for a lot of students. But what it means is, well, let me back up and say, one way to think about information is that you're just reporting it. And to report something means you go out, you acquire it, you acquire the information, and you bring it back and say, here, I'm reporting that, there are 13 cars in the parking lot, or whatever the information is. Synthesizing information, to synthesize something, means to take multiple things and kind of work them together into one new thing, right? When you're doing research, um, as a little kid, you might just think that research involves getting information and then reporting it in your paper. A college level research paper should go beyond that, and it should take information from all the different sources and synthesize it into something new. Well, how do you do that? Well, you read all the sources and you kind of develop your own angle on it, right? Um, I like the way that the book describes um, research as being kind of like joining a conversation, right? Before you are going to say what you want to say about conspiracy theories or Wikipedia or something like that, you go out and you read what other people are saying, and it kind of catches you up to speed with, the book suggests you think of all those sources as being kind of a conversation. A bunch of experts are discussing some idea. One article says this, a book says that, another article says this, another article says that, a website says this. There's all these voices of people who are commenting about whatever the topic is. And it's as though you've stepped into the room and you hear all these voices and hear what they're saying, and you want to join the conversation. Your paper is your attempt to join the conversation. So, you know, in real life, if you walked into a room and there's a group of people discussing something, you would do more than just report back to them what had already been said by them, right? If the discussion was where we should go for vacation as a group, and you wouldn't come in and listen for a while and say, well, Bob says that we should do such and such, but Susan says this, whereas Jeffrey says that, and Tom says this. And people would look at you and say, well, yeah, that's what we all said, but what do you think? And ideally, you take in the information that other people are saying and you come up with your own observations about it. You'd say something, well, that vacation we took before was kind of like the one you're proposing now, and that one seemed like it was there's too much that we had planned. Um, you know, uh, we did such and such that was too expensive and not really worth it, and I suggest that we invite so and so to come along on the vacation. These are all new ideas that you're bringing into the conversation, right? It's not as easy to do that, of course, in a research paper, but the more you read about your subject, the more it'll stimulate your own thinking, and you'll see new ways to put the ideas together, right? There'll be certain ideas that'll appeal to you more. You'll make those more central to your paper. Other ones that you don't think are as important as some other people think they are, and so on and so forth. So that's synthesizing your ideas. Um, Taking the ideas of others, taking them on, thinking about them, seeing how they fit in your own mind, and coming up with your own angle on things. So, as I said, it's only a couple of pages in the book, but it's sort of the heaviest, most significant of the two things that I had you read for today. The other section, R4, is about just sort of more mechanically, how do you do it? How do you quote and paraphrase and summarize? Um, and that's more straightforward. Synthesis is, I think, pretty widely recognized to be, the most challenging but the most useful part of writing a research paper. Um, it's the sort of biggest piece of intellectual work you have to do, taking on all these different ideas and figuring out how they all fit together and trying to fill in gaps and extend people's ideas and so forth. All right. Anything else? I think that's it. 9 minutes and 45 seconds. That's not so bad. I'll see you at conference time. Bye.